Welcome to the special board meeting for Thursday, September 3rd. It is currently 6:06 p.m. Welcome everybody. This meeting is being held via remote participation. And so let's see, for opening items, we just need to call the meeting to order and announce that it will be recorded. We are also on Facebook Live, and the meeting recording will be available afterwards. And with that, I think we are ready for public comment.
Oh. Hi, everyone. It's Liz Saul. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. I was having some Wi-Fi issues. Anyway, we only have one public comment that reached out ahead of time, and this person couldn't be at the meeting, so I was just going to read it in so that it gets into the meeting minutes. It's really just in the form of a couple questions with regards to sports. So the first one, specifically around, soccer being moved to the fall 2 season, the question was just being asked whether or not this was a conference-wide decision or if it's specific to AMSA, meaning are all the schools in the conference region postponing to the fall 2? The second one was, what is the plan to play outdoors during fall 2, since most of that time is still winter? Given that a lot of times in March, specifically, the tournaments tend to get canceled, there was just some concern around the grass fields and whether or not they'd even be able to play. So I don't think we need to address these because they'll probably be addressed in Pete's presentation, but I did, like I said, just want to get them read in. One more. Okay. So just one other question. How does the league conference plan to have outdoor soccer seasons during the winter? Okay, so it was just a follow-on. So it's all the same thing. So anyway, I will leave it at that. I did not have any other questions. That was the only question that, or person that came through for public comment, unless there's anyone on the phone.
All right, any other public comment? Hearing none, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ellen to present the fall sports plan.
Okay, so I am going to, thank you, Roger. I'm going to attempt to share my slides with you. Are you seeing my slides?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Okay, so Pete and I put these together, and I will talk to you for just a couple minutes at the beginning, and then Pete will take over. Pete, I probably have to click and move through the slides for you, so just give me a high sign.
You got it.
I will start by saying that we put a great deal of thought and conversation and time into coming up with this plan. And once again, it was kind of a opportunity for me to kind of do the gut check, and what was something that we were all going to be able to feel comfortable with, and to look at the modifications that were made, and to make sure that we didn't feel that we were putting our students and their families at risk. And so that was, we also used the back to school plan as a foundation for this as well. So just a quick overview of what we'll be looking at. We're going to talk about our fall 1, which is this period of time from September 18th through the end of the season, and what we're proposing which sports we hold this fall. We'll be discussing the 3 sports that are up for discussion are golf, cross country, and soccer. And Pete will expand a little bit more about decisions that have already been made by the league around football, field hockey, and volleyball. So we're looking at golf, cross country, and soccer, and we're also going to take a look at the financial impact. As we mentioned at our last board meeting, that joint guidance came out from the Department of Education and MIAA, which was released on August 18th. And then based on those standards, the Massachusetts Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs also published guidelines effective August 17th of 2020. And then modifications, MIA and the different coaches and folks like Pete got together and created modifications per sport. And those modifications were released to the public on August 28th, 2020, which really wasn't that long ago. Because AMSA is a remote learning school right now for the first term of the year, if we decide to go forward with any kind of a fall sports program, we need the approval from our Board of Trustees in order to move that forward. Let's see, Pete has been attending league, districts, and MIA planning meetings. Based on those meetings and coupled with what he's been given, the guidance that has been provided to all of us, we are presenting this plan to all of you. We shared the plan for feedback yesterday with our families, and Pete can talk to you a little bit about that. And also just wanted to remind you that they're talking about the fall season starting Friday, September 18th. And Pete, this is your slide, right?
Yeah, yep, we'll get it going, sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you to our Board of Trustees members for setting aside a special meeting to discuss athletics. I can speak on behalf of our coaches and student athletes. We really appreciate it. And I guess a notion I'd like to dispel right off the bat is this is not going to be a typical fall. What we're presenting to you tonight regarding cross country and golf is not business as usual. There are many guidelines, protocols, procedures, and modifications that are going to be abided by. And that's how we hope to get our kids back to some semblance of normalcy and competing for our school this fall. So it's definitely not your typical fall, I assure you that. And the first thing listed there is a COVID-19 specific waiver. Principal Naraki and I have talked to Michael Joyce, the school's attorney. We are working on a specific waiver for COVID-19 that all of our student athlete participants will have signed before they participate. So that'll be something that needs to get before they participate. What I mean when it says pre-workout and pre-contest screening, this is consistent with what the Commissioner of Education wanted from the schools that are coming back this fall. He's not requiring that, and he doesn't recommend that the schools take the onus of screening the participants for temperature. What we're going to do is, and this is what the MIA has asked us to do, and that's have the coaches and student athletes do that on their own. So it's kind of the honor system, but each coach, each official, and each student athlete should be taking their temperature prior to any participation in a practice or a competition. And if there's any symptom at all, whether it be temperature or any other symptom that they feel that's relevant to COVID-19, it enacts a whole protocol on where to go from there and how they need to be, separated from the team at that point. In terms of cohorts, participants, attendance, think across country. That's a sport we're going to talk about in greater detail here in a few moments. Our cross country team at AMSA can be pretty large, and we do anticipate it being probably larger this fall with, now that we're not running soccer and volleyball and some of the other sports. So our cross country team can be pretty large. And, again, in dispelling notions, I don't want anyone to envision a group of 80 kids at Galone Park, circled and stretching and high-fiving. It's not going to be like that. The teams are going to be broken down into smaller groups called cohorts, and those cohorts will not change throughout the year. Those are the groups of kids that the student athletes will be with throughout the entire year, start to finish, and they will have very limited interaction with student athletes from other cohorts. And we will keep daily attendance of who was participating in each cohort each day. So if, God forbid, there needs to be a contact tracing situation, we'll know exactly who was interacting with who on any given day. Social distancing, of course, as a society, especially here in Massachusetts, we do a pretty good job with this. Our kids, from what I've been told throughout the summer, and they're preparing for a fall season, they've done a fantastic job with social distancing. So I know that they will continue to do that if given the opportunity to participate this fall. And we'll go into it in greater detail when we talk about sport-specific protocols and procedures. But again, there are a number of guidelines that will be followed in each sport. So there'll be a lot of different protocols and procedures that will be enacted this fall to give our students an opportunity to participate and also, mitigate the disease as best we can. Equipment and hydration. equipment, as you can imagine, with cross country and golf, there'll be no shared equipment. It's just not something we're going to have to do in those two sports. I do know that golfers can sometimes reach into each other's bags and swing a club and putt with each other's putter, but given the pandemic, there'll be no sharing of any equipment out on the golf course or out on the cross course. And of course, hydration. Old Mr. Jones isn't going to be supplying water coolers to all of our teams. The student athletes are going to be called on to provide their own hydration. No one wants to be sharing water bottles and drinking out of big Gatorade coolers at contests and at practices. So student athletes are responsible for their own hydration. In the geographic pods for scheduling, this is something that's still pretty fluid. It should come together over the next 36 hours. We were instructed to have decisions made as best we can by tomorrow, by September 4th. So in other school communities, they're having meetings like this and similar to the meetings that I've had with Ellen and Mike throughout the week. Decisions should be being made tonight and tomorrow. So once that happens, once we know who's participating in what season and in what sports, we will build our schedules within geographic pods so that we're competing against the same 5 schools throughout the fall. And hopefully those schools are in an area where we won't need to travel too far. We won't need to have long bus rides to get to these schools harvested. So more to come on that. It's not finalized yet, but it should come together over the weekend. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about golf to get going. And I think golf is pretty straightforward in terms of what our kids are expecting. They've been doing it all summer. When the courses reopened in May, much of the protocols and modifications that are in play here for our high school season are already in play throughout the summer. And I threw a couple things in there, like raking the bunkers. Anytime you find yourself in a sand trap, there's usually a rake there to rake up after your sand shot. Those rakes aren't even on the course anymore, so there'll be no rake for student athletes to be touching. So those rakes aren't even out there. Leaving the flag stick in the hole is something that the game of golf changed last year. For generations, it was a penalty to put the ball into the hole with the flag stick, but that rule changed pre-pandemic. So now the kids are pretty conditioned to, given COVID-19, no one touches the flag stick. The flag stick, remains in the hole throughout the round. So no one's touching flags. A little bit about student athlete responsibilities. Individual players, they do find themselves in common areas at the golf course, whether it be the clubhouse or the parking lot when they arrive, the practice green. There will be times where they're in common areas and a group does form. So it's imperative that the student athletes maintain social distancing. They're wearing masks throughout that process. And the coaches are kind of going to be the arbiters of that. The coaches are going to be making sure that happens. And again, like I touched on, all golfers are only touching their own equipment. They're not sharing scorecards. They're not sharing pencils to write on scorecards. They're playing with their own clubs. They're playing with their own balls, and no one's touching each other's equipment. Masks and social distancing. It's pretty easy to envision social distancing on a golf course, I think. Once they get off the first tee, they tend to disperse for the most part, and there will be 10-minute intervals in between tee times to better promote social distancing. The masks are going to be worn in all common areas, but once the kids do get out on the course and they're socially distant, they can remove the masks or at least take the masks off the face. But anytime they do find themselves within 6 feet of a competitor or a teammate, and that might happen as they, traverse a bridge over a creek or over a lake or something, and it gets narrow, that's when the kids would put the mask back on. But they are allowed to remove the mask for time while they're competing when they are socially distant. In terms of event protocol, again, the coaches are going to be the arbiter of that. There are certain protocols and procedures that are in place for high school golf in a typical year, and that includes getting together before the match, pairing the kids together, writing their names on scorecards, swapping scorecards, comparing scores, and all of that's going to be done very differently. The coaches are going to do a lot of that pre-match to not only avoid sharing cards and surfaces that could be touched by multiple people, but also to keep those groups to a minimum. So the coaches are going to do a lot of stuff like sharing lineups and grouping the teams together ahead of time. And that goes for the post-event protocol as well. A big part of golf is at the end of the round, you swap scorecards and you attest to each other's score. And that's a big part of the game in high school golf. But it's all about verbal attestation this fall. Student athletes they'll keep track of their own score and they'll keep track of their playing partner's score, and they'll just verbally attest at the end of the match. And that's how that post-match protocol will be handled. Again, everything is to is to, get the kids dispersed back off the course onto their bus or into their parents' cars and away from the course as quickly as possible. And again, without, not having too many things exchange hands, touch surfaces and all that. So it should be a pretty smooth post-event protocol where, it's pretty quick, verbal attest the score and go about your separate ways. Cross country, in terms of pre-practice and pre-contest protocols, the way AMSA cross country works in a lot of the schools that aren't, really, really large schools, north of 1,000 kids, cross country, they do it together. Boys and girls are together. Mark Vital is our cross country varsity coach, and he has the boys and girls together. In some of the larger districts like Wachusett and Shrewsbury, they are separate. And we're going to see that throughout Central Mass this fall. We're going to separate the boys and girls. So when if AMSA is competing against Hudson in cross country, the boys will be at home at Galone Park and the girls will be at Hudson High at the alternative location. When we play again later in the season, we'll swap. And that's obviously to keep the numbers on a given course to a minimum. And again, I touched on the cohorts. That's going to be crucial for cross country. Same pods of 5 to 10 students are always going to be together. And that's going to be a huge part of how we do cross country. Dual meets only. So a lot of times in cross country, you'll have multiple schools. Like we run the Galone Cup and it's Marlboro, AMSA, and Assabet, boys and girls together. Again, it's only dual meets. One school versus another school, one gender. And then again, the other gender will be at the alternative location. And that's just trying to keep the meets as small as possible because we do anticipate some large numbers this year participating in cross country. And the cross country courses, the physical courses that the teams run, the coaches are going to have to work on making those more suitable for social distancing. Coach Vital and the coaches at Marlboro High will have to go through the course. There's multiple courses available at Galone Park, and what they'll have to do is preseason go through and find ways where they can utilize the wider areas of the course and try and minimize the amount of times where they're in real, narrow paths. Again, that's just to promote social distancing while out on the course. And the starting line, and this is something Mrs. Lindsay and I spoke about at length, we were very concerned about. You can all picture like the Boston Marathon, like start line, just mass of humanity congregating at once. And what we're going to do to do the starting of each race is the teams are going to be separated, and there'll be 14 feet in between each team. And when you have one team over here, there'll be 6 feet in between those runners from one team, and then again 14 feet away is the other team, and there'll be 6 feet in between those participants from the other team. So you're talking about a large starting line that's really spread out and a lot of social distancing being adhered to in that. And then they're going to go out in waves. So they'll be they'll go out in 3-minute intervals. So the first cohort will go out, we'll wait 3 minutes and then send another cohort out. And we'll just keep doing that until every runner's out on the course. And same idea with the finish line. We have to do what we can to not have fans and everybody congregate at the finish line. There's going to be post-race protocols in place to do the scoring, like kind of what I talked about with golf. I know Coach Vital has like a popsicle scoring method where as competitors come across the finish line, he'll hand them a popsicle, and that's how we then enter the participants in the score sheet, and we know how to score the meet. I think what we're talking about doing is filming the finish line. That way, again, when a student athlete finishes the race, they can disperse, and then the coaches can kind of do the scoring afterwards, remotely in their homes, looking at the video and then doing the scoring, an hour later once everybody's dispersed the course. I saw Ms. Bowen, you had asked about masks. I apologize for not mentioning that. Similar to golf, the masks are going to be worn in all the common areas and all the pre-race warm-ups, stretching and all that. They will wear the masks. They do have the opportunity to, once they're out on the course, if they feel that they're socially distanced and they're, there's not competitors and teammates around, they can remove the mask. But again, similar to golf, in all common areas, pre-post, they are wearing the masks. Thank you all. And soccer, we did touch on it. We did elect to move soccer to fall two. Fall two is, and I've alluded it into a couple of the community emails we sent out. Fall two is a second floating fall season. It's scheduled after the conclusion of the winter and prior to the spring. So I don't want anyone to think that if soccer is being moved to fall two, that they have to miss basketball or they have to choose between outdoor track and soccer. That is not the case. The start and end dates of winter and spring have been accommodated so that the start and end dates have been changed so that we can accommodate a second fall season, so that sports like volleyball, which in all of Central Mass, volleyball has been pushed to fall two. in the entire state, football has been pushed to fall. And here in Marlboro, Assabet has elected to push all their fall sports to fall 2. So our field hockey co-op as well. So students in those sports, volleyball, football, field hockey, and now soccer, they're scheduled to participate in fall 2, and that will not conflict with their winter or spring participation. In fact, it's kind of a cool little silver lining in all this. They will be allowed to participate in 4 sports. So if you're a soccer player and you're listening to this right now, you're not playing soccer until February. You can do cross country now. You can do your winter season. You can do soccer in fall 2, and you can do a spring season. It's kind of a cool silver lining. You can play 4 sports. And just a little bit about what went into the decision. I think, Ellen, Mike, and I talked at length about it, and we all kind of came to the same agreement that the modifications came out, and they were jarring. And they were jarring whether you are you're a fan of the game of soccer and you believe it's the beautiful game and pure soccer. These modifications made it not that. I mean, it drastically changed the game. And in terms of, and this is where Mrs. Lindsay was coming from, in terms of safety and doing everything we possibly can to mitigate and reduce exposure, she wasn't feeling good about it. We weren't feeling good about it. These modifications while they were overly restrictive in terms of what the game looks like, they didn't do enough for us in terms of keeping the kids 100% safe. So that was the biggest part that was the deciding factor to move soccer to fall 2. And just to reiterate, this is not us canceling soccer for the year. We do intend on participating in fall 2. So that's just a little bit about soccer.
Pete, could you talk a little bit about the fields over at Four Kicks and how that's going to work over there, addressing some of the questions from the parent who contacted us?
Certainly, yeah. I did check with Four Kicks prior to having our meeting, Ellen, on Tuesday to try and make this decision. I did check with Four Kicks, and we're going to be fine. We have the field space over there at that time. We have, we kind of have priority over there. So while we're typically not on the outdoor fields at the end of February like that in the first few weeks of March, they are going to make those fields available to us. And once mid-March comes, we typically have those fields anyway after school because that's when lacrosse starts. So we have those reservations locked in for lacrosse anyway. But yeah, I've been assured that we have the availability over there to play in fall 2 for soccer.
And I think plow.
I'm sorry.
And they plow, Pete.
They plow. Yeah, they plow the fields when needed. So we had, the fact that we have turf at our disposal, made this decision possible. If you're a school that has grass, I mean, it's really not a conversation. You should be playing in fall 1. If you're a school that has only grass fields available, but because we have the turf, I think we have that flexibility, and we're going to be able to do it. One of the other questions regarding fall 2 from the the question that came from the public forum is who else is playing? Well, to be honest, we don't know 1,000% who's opting to fall 2. And I don't want to speak for other schools because these decisions are being made tonight and tomorrow in meetings such as this. But I am confident that there's going to be 7 or 8 schools that are playing in fall 2 in the sport of soccer. And I can tell you that 5 of those schools, including us, are from our conference, from our Colonial Athletic League. So we will have the opportunity to play soccer in fall 2 against teams that we typically compete with in a normal year.
And that was a very important piece. We wanted to make sure that if soccer happens, and none of us know the future and what's going to happen over the next several months, but if we play soccer in fall 2, we wanted to make sure that the kids are going to have people to play with, depending on how things look then.
Agreed. I think that's all I have for soccer, Ellen, unless there's any other questions.
Okay. So this is the financial impact. Can everyone see that? All right.
Yep. Yes, we can.
Okay, super.
I can see it. Is there any way you can scroll in a little bit?
Well, that's a really good question, Miss Bowen.
Sorry. If not, I'll try and. All right, wait. I'll work it on my end.
Let's see.
Ellen, if you go up to where you see where it says view under fall 2020 sports financial impact.
Yes.
Yeah, right there. Yep.
How's that? Is that too big?
Good for me.
Okay.
Thank you. That's much better.
Super. Okay. So these would be, Pete, explain a little bit about the decision that we made to reduce, why we reduced the fees.
Certainly. Certainly. I think the normal fee of $350, I think we have expectations and an experience associated with that fee structure in my mind anyway. And I don't know that we're going to offer a similar experience. Again, when the EEA guidelines came out, I felt like the biggest responsibility of me as the athletic director is to reduce exposure. So for me, that if you're a varsity athlete and you typically practice and train and play 5 or 6 times a week, we're probably going to dial that back a little bit. It'll probably be 4 to 5 times a week, or three to 5 times a week. So I think in terms of perhaps not being able to offer the full AMSA athletic experience, I thought it made sense to maybe reduce the fee a little bit. And if you look at the contest alone, I think, a cross-country season is probably, if you include invitationals, 14 to 16 meets. That will likely be cut in half, again, because we're just going to compete in dual meets against schools in our geographic pod. Golf, I try and play as many golf matches as possible, typically like 18 to 20 matches. Again, we'll probably end up playing 12 or 14 matches. So I think in terms of contests and how often we do team activities in-person team activities, I think there'll be a little bit of a reduction there to reduce exposure. So it made sense to reduce the fee a little bit.
I had a quick question. In terms of, you made a comment earlier about moving sports and potentially playing 4. Would you consider bumping up the number of participating students in these to accommodate other people? So in terms of golf, would you go to 10 if there was 10 kids that wanted to play, or are you going to keep it at a certain number?
No, I think it would be fair to consider. I don't think we would go more than like 10 on golf. Again, just because you're at the mercy of other courses. Sometimes we're told for an away match to only bring our top 6 or our top 8. So if you have 10, which we've taken 10 in the past, we've taken 9 and 10. We're certainly open to that. We'll have tryouts and make that determination. But yeah, we're not married to the number 8 for any particular reason. We could expand on that a little bit.
And in terms of you talked about the fields for soccer. Is the golf courses also in participation and been in contact with, just to make sure those will be available?
Well, I think, Ben, if we were to make the move to fall 2 for golf, you're essentially canceling golf. I
understand that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I guess what I should make clear is what we're looking to do in fall 1 is golf and cross country. What we'd like to do right now, starting on September 18th, is golf and cross country. What we're going to do with soccer is push that out to the fall 2 and begin that in February.
Yeah, but so Marlboro Country Club or wherever you're going to play golf, have those already agreed that we're fine with schools playing golf on our courses, or Charter Oaks, wherever you guys play?
I haven't heard of that being a concern. I think the area courses are expecting the high school teams to play. Once that announcement came out from the MIA that fall sports were happening, I haven't heard of any course concern.
Okay, great, thanks.
Atypical of any other year. Sometimes the courses feel like there's a lot of play on their courses, but yeah, no, I haven't heard that as a concern.
And then you asked about cross country. I would love to see. I think we may have a lot of the soccer players that would like to run cross country, and so we don't know what those numbers will be like, but I'd like to see that program expand.
So,
okay.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. 2 questions. This is Samini. One was around the other sports that weren't talked about today and that may get opened up for fall 2. I'm not sure what the guidance there is. Is there any guidance on practice for those sports and whether you're going to be running any practice or allowing for kids, like Miss Lindsay just said, Ellen, about soccer players wanting to run cross country and, sort of keep up fitness levels, if you will. And then the other question, I'll take these offline, are around spectators and whether there's any guidance for who can come to the games and how many people you will allow. Thanks.
Yes, so there will be guidance coming out regarding spectators. And what we're trying to do as athletic directors is have that come from like the Central Mass Athletic Director Association level so that it's consistent in all of Central Mass. So what we don't want is like Shrewsbury to be allowing 4 spectators and AMSA only allowing 1. And then when the 2 schools compete, there's all sorts of confusion. So what we're trying to do is have a uniform norm, if you will, for spectators. So all that's forthcoming. In terms of practicing fall sports for those sports going to fall 2, it is allowed under the MIA guidelines. So if you're a volleyball player at AMSA, there is an opportunity under the MIA rules to do some practicing this fall. Again, we're trying to come up with guidance on how to best do that, because we don't want kids being pulled in multiple directions. I don't want as we're getting back to school in COVID-19, I don't want a volleyball player to hear from her volleyball coach, hey, we're having an out-of-season workout, and then hear from the basketball coach, hey, we're having an out-of-season workout, and then hear from the softball coach, same thing. I don't want the kids pulled in multiple directions. So again, as athletic directors at the Central Mass level, we're trying to come up with uniform guidance to help us aid in those decisions. And also for us with some of our sports, we're moving volleyball to fall too. So all of our monies that are set aside for court rental at Four Kicks is now, we need that in fall too. So to build in some volleyball practices over at Four Kicks now, yeah, I'm willing to do that, but I don't want to take away money that we need in the spring to run the sport the way we need to run it, which is, in there every day for practice and that stuff. But that's not to say that our kids can't get together on their own and practice soccer and volleyball with some help from their coaches to get ready for that fall 2 season. That is allowed under the MIA rules right now.
And just to reiterate again, volleyball is not being run probably for a number of reasons, but one is that many of the schools are using their gymnasiums for classrooms and for cafeterias, and so that was the decision to move everything to fall 2. And what was the other? Oh, then and Assabet, as we've heard, is moving all of their sports to fall 2, and the same thing. So, and football is not being allowed to run. The other thing I want to remind us of is that if Marlboro turns red in the state codes, which we kind of are teetering on the edge there, and I noticed this week that not only is Marlboro yellow, but all of our core towns are yellow now. Maynard, Clinton, Hudson, along with obviously Worcester, and we know Framingham has turned red. So when the towns turn red over a period of weeks, and it's not just 1 week, but kind of a rolling 2 or 3 weeks, we would not be able to run sports at all. So it could be at some point that the season is interrupted if we start having higher numbers in Marlboro, just something to keep in mind.
I had a quick question, just to compare to last year. The transportation costs for cross country, are those incurring the lower capacity of the buses, or is that similar to what last year we spent on transportation?
And that number that you see there is a large reduction in what we would have spent in a typical year for cross country transportation. We bus the kids over to Galoni almost every day after school in a typical year. So not having to do that because we're remote, we anticipate the student athletes will just show up at Galoni for practice on their own. That cost is reduced in a big way. So that number there is just, like I said, those few away meets that we have, that's what that number reflects.
But it would take an effect that you can only have 30% capacity on a bus and all the other restrictions. So inside that number, you've already kind of did the math to figure out, I'm going to need
Exactly
3 buses on this. Okay, I just want to make sure that piece was there. And because of transportation for golf, there was never golf transportation, or you're just deciding this year there won't be?
No, we use the 2 AMSA white buses. The coach has always driven the golf. Again, the numbers are small enough to do that.
Okay, but they'll be used. The buses will be used this year. Those small buses will be used for golf this year, and we have correct capacity, all those things to meet the restrictions and stuff.
Yeah, so
Right.
typically, Coach Chelino and it was Coach Amaral prior to him. They took 1 white bus. They piled the 8 or 10 kids on the bus. Now we'll be using both buses, and I'll help Coach Chelino.
Okay.
We'll only have 4 to 5 kids on each bus.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and what we'll do is once we know who's signed up for cross country, Pete's going to put out a survey to find out which parents will be just bringing their kids over to Galoni. Because remember, the kids are at home, and they may live closer to Galoni, and their folks or our older kids can drive. Will just drive themselves. So we'll have a good idea of how many kids are actually going to need to be on the bus.
Okay, great. And
We aren't required to provide busing then? That was a question I know you had. And
yeah, I just want to make sure because the follow-up question to that one too is if we had any liabilities at school when someone was on their way to an actual school event because of a sporting event, we don't have that liability as a school, right? So if a kid was driving themselves to Galoni or something like that, it's not the school's responsibility if God forbid something happened to them, right? Even though they're on their way to a school event.
We can get that confirmed. Mike Naraki may actually, there he is. He may actually have some, because he deals with the lawyer a lot on those types of things, but we can have something added in. I'm not exactly sure the answer of that question, Ben, to be honest with you, but that we can certainly have something like that added into the waiver. But we already have a field trip form and club forms that talk about that. And I know Jess is involved in a lot of different field trips with kids and things like that. Mike, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess a question for Ben real quick. Are you referring to, you're referring to driving to practice, correct? Not
or to a game. Yeah. So basically there was a scheduled event because of the sport I'm playing on. A kid takes his parents' car and drives there, God forbid again, gets in a car accident on the way there. The transport between their house and the event is not the liability of the school. It's while they're at the event, we have the line. And again, I'm not trying to make a big deal on this. I just want to make sure, because this is a weird world, right? So I just didn't want to say, oh, in the past, we all just bust them. So we never had to worry about this stuff. And in the past, coaches never let them drive themselves or the parents drop them off. They always came to the school and did that. So maybe it just always was a mute point in the past. I just asked it now because I wouldn't want something to happen, first of all. Second of all, if that's a liability for us as a school, that would change our way we would transport kids then, right? We'd have to think about it.
I don't think that we would be liable, but I do think it would be worth just having our attorney put in a simple bullet point or two, just covering the transportation piece. I'm thinking of if a student's driving to a regular school day, let's say in normal circumstances, a student was driving to school and something happened, we of course wouldn't be liable in that situation, but I do know what you mean. This is like an off hours event. So, Pete, we can touch base on that. We can cover that easily.
Yep.
Yeah. The second thing if you can touch, sorry, I just want to add on to that thing is equal opportunity for everyone, right? So traditionally in the past, school buses and our transportation allowed everyone to be able to participate. In the event that someone cannot get to a field, and does that mean that they aren't capable or cannot then play that sport? I just wanted to make sure we also cover ourselves there, that we're not, we're not allowing just the kids who can get rides to get to play sports this year. We actually, as a school, I thought we have some responsibility to provide that. But again, I'm just looking for clarity. That's all.
During remote learning, we wouldn't be responsible to pick the child up at their home and bring them to the school in order to get on the bus to be able to go to Galoni Park. Okay. But we do have an app where we connect parents for carpooling and things like that. And we would be, happy to do that. And, oftentimes people will put out pleas onto AMSA chat and other Facebook groups in the different towns that they have them to reach out for help with rides.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that there wasn't some other stipulation as a school, as a providing schools sports, right? A school has a responsibility to provide equal an opportunity to everyone, regardless of their ability to get to and from a match, right? So if that doesn't fall into our responsibility and we can provide at least or broker the ability for other people to get to places because they can do that, then that's fine. I just want to make sure there's no state laws that say if you have a sport, you have to provide equal opportunity to kids to have the opportunity to play.
No, there's never been any guidance around that I've ever heard. Pete, have you ever heard of anything like that?
No.
This remote learning situation is different for all of us. But.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I don't mean to, I just want to ask these questions because, they just haven't, I just don't know what, in this remote learning world, like if we would have just automatically have done that because of, we were in school or something, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pete,
I have a quick question for clarification.
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead, Maura. I'll
go
go next.
ahead, Cindy. Okay. All right. I'll go. You had mentioned that if we, or Ellen, you had mentioned if Marlboro turns red or if our core communities turn red for an extended period of time, whatever that might be, that's dictated by the league, right? Is that MIAA, so that if Marlboro turns red, Marlboro High doesn't play sports and ASPA doesn't play sports, or is that as an AMSA specific?
No, that is Department of Education specific. That has been stated by the Commissioner of Education.
All right, I just want to be clear because that's a question that'll come up. So like we have to bail if we turn red, but nobody else does, so it's across the board.
No, that's something that on all the superintendent calls that we've been told that multiple times.
Okay.
Now,
all right. Thank you.
One more thing on that, Ellen. What the MIA has promised some clarification on is kind of what happens when a community does turn red? And we saw this with the community of Sutton this week. They were red for a matter of days.
They said to do a rolling couple, 2 or 3 weeks. So
Really?
because we are seeing towns that are red, and then they're yellow, and then red, and then they're green, and all of that. So he and I think when they originally put the plan out, it was really to look at it 1 week at a time.
Yep.
But then they realized that there was going to be sometimes this large fluctuation. So they have asked us to do a kind of a rolling 2 or 3 weeks of data before you switch from one thing to another, so that some schools, you're not remote 1 week and then the next week all of a sudden everyone's in 100% and back and forth.
Understood.
Pete, if I can go back, it's Cindy. If I can go back for a second to the fall 2 sports and what you were saying about if the students, let's say the girls volleyball team decides they want to practice and they want to start now practicing and whatever. Do the old rules still apply? Remember, it used to have to be captain's practices, no coaches allowed until like August 15th for football and whatever day. Will that still apply, or will the coaches actually be allowed to be with the kids?
Oh, great point. Great question. The MIA actually, when they announced the plan for fall sports back in mid-August, they did lift Rule 40, which is what you're referring to, the out-of-season coaching ban. I think that sparked a lot of at least conversation amongst ADs, because as I said earlier, I don't want it to be the wild, wild west of free-for-all where kids are getting pulled to multiple sport workouts in a given day. So I am anticipating that athletic directors at either the Central Mass level or our district, which is half the Central Mass, I'm hoping that there's some guidance created to help us manage that. And if it's local control, then I'll handle it. But I'm a proponent of the fall 2 kids getting together and working out. If their coaches want to be a part of that, that's great. I think at least to get it started, they should at least take a look, because we do need to make sure that these EEA guidelines are being followed in terms of social distancing and masks. So it won't be your typical captain's practice that you're thinking of in July. I think it would have to have a little more oversight from me and the coaches.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a whole nother conversation, because
Right.
I'm not comfortable with people bouncing into each other inside a building,
Right.
playing volleyball. So that's a whole nother big conversation that we really haven't had yet. But
soccer.
Well, that's the problem with soccer. No matter how much you encourage or give yellow cards to kids who are charging each other and another kid who's trying to protect their goal, the fact is that they're coming in close contact with each other. And there was, I saw in the news last night, 12 cases of COVID on a kids hockey team up in Nashua. And so 8 kids are involved and 4 coaches.
Wow.
And the kids were from all over New England, because they were playing hockey together recently on an extra team. So, this is happening. And I guess, I know hockey is a very physical sport in non-COVID times, but so is soccer and so is volleyball.
Yes.
So I think we have to look at each sport individually and decide what we're comfortable with. As far as I'm concerned, if these kids would like to run cross country, fantastic. They can keep in great shape. Mark Vital will make sure that I have complete trust in Mark to make sure those kids are kept safe and separated, and in Pete to run a safe program. But we're going to look at one sport at a time.
Thank you. Good answer.
And
So Ellen,
these kids
just
are
as a
conditioned
follow-up,
to play a certain way.
Pardon me, Maura?
I was just saying these kids are conditioned. I mean, they're trained. They learn to play a certain way. So to suddenly, all of the expectations that are being put on them that are changing, that becomes instinct after a while. And so that becomes challenging.
Because my kids all played soccer. And so.
Yeah.
So Ellen, as a clarification, are you saying that for example, soccer and volleyball, that the school will decide whether or not there will be team practices, and that will be determined by the school?
I believe that's the right decision. What we've been asked by the state is to come to you for fall one and to have approval on what our plan is. So that's what we're doing. We haven't really had conversations around team practices or anything that would happen between now and then. We are proposing that we move soccer because of the nature of the sport to fall two, knowing that we will have teams to play and that Four Kicks feels that they can take care of the fields. And then anything else that's happening, we know that field hockey and football, well, we don't know what's going on with football, but field hockey certainly and volleyball has definitely been moved to fall two.
Yeah, but so just as a clarification, so I understand that what's being proposed tonight, what we will be voting on is whether golf and cross country will be approved to go with your plan. But as an extension to that, given this discussion about the fall two sports having team practices or not, that is a area which you are going to decide for the school as to what you're going to do, and it's not something that needs board approval.
Not from what I understand, no.
Okay, so
It's just what's being played now.
Right. Right.
And the fact that we're putting soccer off to fall two.
Right. Oh, so that the moving soccer to fall two is something we'll be voting on as part of this?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Just a quick question, and I gotta thank Jess for bringing up Mrs. Martinez's question in the back to school meeting a few weeks ago. When you talk about cohorts, is there any consideration about siblings? Because you should assume that siblings are in the same household and sharing and potentially kind of it's not having the same effect as being in the same cohort with other students.
It's a great question. I think for golf it would be, and we do have a set of triplets, the McCabe's, on our golf team. I'd have to check with Coach Cellino. I think that's unique, obviously, to have three siblings on one golf team. I think the way you would do cohorts in golf is to do it by, your top golfer to your eighth golfer. But I think in our unique circumstances, perhaps we could do something similar to what you're describing and do the cohort with that in mind. For cross country, I think it would be a little bit more difficult. You could have a junior who runs really well in an eighth grade or seventh grade sibling who's really not at that level, and I don't think you could pair them in the same cohort. But there's probably more discussion to be had on that. I think that Coach Vital and I, the discussions we've had about cohorts so far has definitely been on, considering their running ability and their athletic ability. Siblings, I don't think is something we've touched on yet, so that's definitely a discussion item that's worthy.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't quite know where my slides went. Okay. Any other questions? I was just looking at Kristen's list. Any other? I believe we've covered everything. I'm sorry, go ahead.
One more question on the cross country. We've already talked about how golf transport would be done. I presume that the golf team would come to AMSA and then hop on the white buses and go to the meet. Is that a fair description?
Actually, I would anticipate many of the golfers getting to the course on their own.
Okay.
And if a white bus was needed, then Coach Cellino or myself would handle that. I probably misrepresented that how I answered it a little while ago. My brain's still thinking in terms of a normal, we're here at school and we got to get the kids to the course. But yeah, I would imagine that the golfers will likely, for the most part, be getting themselves to the course. And for perhaps a younger student who can't get there on their own, if they need to come to AMSA and be transported to the course, then Coach Cellino.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, and along those lines, Pete, that's what I was wondering is if we need to make that statement, right, so that parents, right, of these kids understand they have a commitment now, where generally they didn't have that commitment, right, where they now understand that if their child's going to play golf or cross country, that it's not like, oh yeah, my kid will just hop on the bus after school and get over to where they got to be. Now they got to realize I got to take time out of my day, drive my child wherever they got to be, and in some cases it's not going to be to Galoni or to Marlboro Country Club, right? It's going to be, to some other place. So I think that would be good. I didn't see that in the the email sent out to the parents, but it just might be interesting for us to understand, that there's an impact on the families, right?
Yeah, we're going to do a survey, Ben,
Okay, cool.
to find out what support they need, what their plans are, and we'll have
great.
a pretty good idea, and then make plans from there.
Yeah, and that may or may not affect the budget you showed, right? So you may
Mhm.
find out that, you know what, oh my gosh, like we got all these people that say the only way I can play sports is if someone can get my kid there and I can drop them off at school, but I can't drive them back and forth to the event. You know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
if that happens, I guess you would just let us know, right? I mean, if there's going to be a major impact on the financial situation based on that survey or decision, you would just filter that through to us. Right?
Well, of course, we budgeted for full fall sports, right? So this is really pared down.
Yep.
The number of games and the number of times that we would transport students under the best of circumstances pre-COVID last year, we're not going to have that many games or that many times we're going to be transporting them. So instead of taking them over to Gloney every day, it may be 2 or 3 times a week. So that's going to reduce all of that.
Yeah, and I think year to date would be, you're going to follow that, right? So you had a budget this year for sports. In the beginning, we're not going to use anywhere near what we thought we would use in fall, right? You'll have this other fall too, which we don't know the impact or the cost of that going to be. But year to date, you don't think our budget will go over what we had based on, what you've projected, right? So
right.
I think that's
and
fine.
Neither one of these sports have any field time over at Fort Kicks, so there's no cost there.
Yeah, and there's no course time, Pete, for golf. Is that donated by somebody for practices and stuff?
Golf, we when the golf program began here, we did have some limited use over at Charter Oaks in Hudson. I want to say it was 2018 that was discontinued on their end. They were just going away from having high school teams use their course. So we've been kind of road warriors the last couple of years.
Okay.
We play a lot of away matches. We did host some home matches at Southborough Country Club, the old St. Mark's. There is a driving range in Southborough that Coach has a relationship over there, so we do practice there. And we do get on Marlboro every once in a while. A lot of our golfers are members at Marlboro. A lot of our families are country club members at Marlboro, so we get on Marlboro every once in a while. But yeah, we don't really have a home course to speak of where I can say, Monday through Friday we're here.
Okay, and there's no cost, so we incur as a school then as you do that road warrior thing you called, right? So
yeah, correct.
You don't budget like, oh, we might have to pay greens fees or something like that. We just kind of float around where we need to go. Okay.
Correct. That's correct. Yep.
Thanks.
I feel like we've probably gotten the information we need. Are we ready to call for a vote?
I think we're close. So last call for questions. I guess I would hearing there are no further questions. I think we've answered just to put it into the record, there was a question on online was asked in the text was asked if the season was canceled partway through, would the sports fees be refunded to the parents? And the answer I got from Liana was it would be proportionally refunded. So if you got halfway through the season, you'd get half your money back.
Yeah.
So,
All right, I make a motion that we vote the plan as presented, either yes, no, or approval with conditions.
Second.
So,
We're voting to approve the plan as presented.
So is the motion, just to clarify, and Cindy, you gave all 3 options. Is it
I did.
Is it to are you proposing that we
No.
vote to accept the plan as presented?
Yes, that's what I planned. Yes, that was it.
All right.
I was being all inclusive.
And I heard a second from Raul. Is that right?
Correct.
And he did it correctly.
All right. Any further discussions or conditions that anyone arguing against saying yes?
Well, I guess the only thing I would say is, Ellen, what you stated was you'll just double check or Mike will double check that there is no liability.
Yep.
Okay. So I don't know if that then Roger falls into approval with conditions that are items want us to address, as opposed to yes.
I believe that that's just a clarification that we would approve, that we would vote, that in this case we would vote yes, and then if once we get clarification from Ellen, we can factor that data in and alter our opinion in the future.
Yeah, we will just make sure that we have it covered in the release.
Right. And I would also say this appears, at least to me, to be very similar to the standard that parents take their kids to a home meet. They watch the meet, they pick them up from the home meet and go home, or the student drives themselves. So this doesn't appear to be different than a normal year. They may be doing more of it, but it feels to me to be the same. So I think we request a clarification on it, and we'll get an update at the next board meeting. And so I think we've addressed that particular concern. Are there other concerns that people have?
Yep. Roll call or?
Hearing no other concerns, I'll do a roll call vote in the usual order. Raul?
Aye.
Jill?
Yes.
Kristen voted yes via text to me. Liz?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Somini?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
Maura?
Yes.
Sheila?
Sheila, you're on mute.
Are you on mute, Sheila? Very good.
She said, I vote yes, I'm on the phone.
Yes, Sheila's voted yes. Ben?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Roger, yes. Motion passes unanimously. I'll take a motion to close the meeting.
I move that we close the meeting.
Motion to.
This is Jess. I second.
So we have Liz and Jess to adjourn the meeting, starting with Raul.
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Kristen? Yes. Liz?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Samini? Jess?
Yes.
Maura?
Yes.
Sheila?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Ben?
Yes.
Cindy? Yes. Shortest meeting ever. Woo!
Roger, yes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Pete and Ellen, for a fantastic presentation, and good job.